Welcome to Dark Sorcery. I'm Alfredo Martinez, and I have with me once again Guion Hughes. Guion,
Hey.
good to have you back on.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And so today we're going to be talking about the Book of the Law. Okay, now Guion he has the exact same copy. Now, a couple years back, Guion and I had done a video on Thelema and the Book of the Law, but we didn't really get much into this text, you know. So what we're going to do is focus solely on this book, and we're going to be commenting on Crowley's commentary on some of it. But yeah, this is going to be interesting. And you know, first of all, the goal of Thelema is to find your spirit, your higher self, your will, what your spiritual purpose is, and to go about that. Now, it could be, you know, it's pretty subjective to everybody else to figure out as to what that is. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think even what Aleister Crowley and the guys who invented it, because you know it's over 100 years old now. We have such a different thing that we could say maybe someday, like artificial intelligence are going to be our higher self, and
Right.
and we're gonna everybody's gonna have an AI on their phone, and that's actually going to be like putting them up the steps. Where Crowley, of course, he was saying he called it a holy guardian angel because that was just bad. He was still coming from a mostly Christian background. He was just trying to kind of like change Christianity the way he thought it needed to be changed, essentially, with Thelema.
Right. And one thing that's, I think, noteworthy to bring up is the fact that there are some people who are divided, and concerning Aiwass, people argue over whether Aiwass was an aspect of his mind and him just speaking from his mind, or if it was an actual being, an actual deity. But then again, concerning the Goetia, he said he had mentioned that these are aspects of my subconscious mind. Is that right?
Yeah, like the collective unconscious or the subconscious mind, So the idea that he had with the Goetia, which I think is just probably you could say for the higher self, spirit too, but he did publish and talk in different ways about different things at different times, So he could have wavered back and forth, but his main style he called scientific illusionism, scientific. So he was trying to come from a scientific background, so he was using psychology because they did, even though 100 years ago they still had Freud and Jung, right? So I mean they had that, so he was coming from the latest science that he understood, and so he was kind of trying to make this more like I want to, like how I say I think magic modernly we should look back at it and call it like psychological technology, psychological tech, because we are using our minds to create our own reality. And we do kind of understand that works, we'll never maybe totally understand it. Like we'll never totally understand anything, but we do kind of understand that, like the law of attraction and things like that, there's just like some pretty good proof that kind of stuff, that what you're thinking about could come into your life and stuff like that. It's not like complete magic. Like you don't have any scientific explanation at all. So he was coming from that point of view back then. I think when it comes to the Book of the Law, though, he was in a trance, and the way that all came about, I think that was just, and but you could argue that that Aiwass was giving him a download, and this is the whole thing, and that was his latest addition into these books that spin off of Christianity, like the Quran or the Book of Mormon. They're Christian, but they spin off in their own way. Crowley spun off in a really different way. He's trying to get rid of the whole orthodoxy, the taboo about sex, taboo about women, all that kind of stuff. Which a lot of people modernly, that makes a lot of sense to, and I like it better, than what Orthodox Christianity is. We both were have experience with that,
Yeah, a new eon, a new, leaving the old and moving into something new. And that's a good point that you bring up, as far as, in the future, people will consider AI as a form of their higher self, because nowadays, a lot of people, if they want to know something, they just kind of open up Chat GPT or GPT or some kind of AI and ask a question, But, it is good to ask your higher self, just out loud. It's, you know, it's there waiting to listen.
Yeah.
You know, but that's I've never heard anyone bring up that way of looking at it. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we got to look at it too as you know, when Crowley was doing his stuff, you know, he'd have to research, he'd have to go find these things in obscure libraries if he wanted to. You know, now we just get our phone and look it up, right? You want to look up like what anything about Aleister Crowley, you know, back in the day, 100 years ago when he did this, or more than 100 years now, you know, because it was 120 years actually ago. Is like 1904 was when the Book of the Law was, you know, translated, and Crowley was into it even before that, went into the occult and all that. You know, it was really hard to find stuff. I mean, even here in the 70s and 80s, it was hard to find occult books, you know, like we talked about in the past. You know, in the 80s, you couldn't get too many occult books, you know. So you had to search these things out, and it was a different way, you know. Now you could actually, you know, go on and just have somebody read one of these books, you know, like the Book of the Law or Crowley's Magic and Theory and Practice, and you could just have somebody read it to you on YouTube, and that's the way that you could absorb it. You know, they didn't have any concept of that. You know, they would.
You know, it's crazy.
Magic, you know,
it's crazy how the internet has completely changed everything.
Oh yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, it's almost like it's a whole new. Everything is just a whole new definition, especially with, you know, spirituality, with the way things are going right now.
Yeah, for sure.
But what we'll do is let's go to. Well, first of all, I want to comment on something here. Let's go to page 21 because you have the same copy that I have.
Yeah, let me check it out here. Okay, 21.
Yeah, so page 21, it says the establishment of the law of, this is it, by the way, for those who are listening, this is actually the introduction, part of the introduction before the Book of the Law. The establishment of the law of Thelema is the only way to preserve individual liberty and to assure the future of the race. In the words of the famous paradox, the absolute rule of the state shall be a function of the absolute liberty of each individual will. And I think it's interesting that Crowley once said that the most complete set of talents and virtues is wholly useless in the absence of willpower and discipline, which that is true.
Yeah.
You know, some people will look at this section and say, well, it's part of, you know, the tyranny that we're seeing, you know, within world politics. But yeah, if you don't have willpower and discipline, you know, that growth is kind of stunted, and it's useless. And it's almost as if the establishment wants that to happen, and that's kind of their aim in a way. What do you think?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and I don't think Crowley was absent of that either, because he, right under it says all men and women are invited to cooperate with the master Therion in this, the great work. So he's, you know, he's basically saying, you know, yeah, you got all this great stuff, but you're invited to cooperate with me to find out about it. You know, it's like he was very clear, and you know, that was another section we could go over, is the comment, you know, where he's very clear. He doesn't want people to talk about this book. He doesn't want people to criticize it. He doesn't really want people to read it and then, like, you know, paraphrase it or anything, like, because I think he saw how the Bible, you know, the Bible became like that, you know, like somebody put the Bible, all these books, you know, and a codex of books, and then, you know, by the end it's transliterated to mean things that people, it didn't even mean anything, you know, like the word witch. I mean, that's not a word. I mean, it's translated from the Hebrew for like a poisoner, a female poisoner, right? So, like, you know, but witch, that like almost invented witchcraft because it's in the Bible, because King James said never suffer a witch, and then that started the whole witch. So like that, they kind of created witchcraft, and now you know, people are putting their own spin on it and saying, you know, we were, you know, this is what we think it was before Christianity like tried to kill it out or something.
Well, have you, concerning that verse, have you picked up a lexicon and looked up where it says witch there and see if that's actually the translation?
The witch, I mean, I believe there's a couple of different translations of when it, because you know that passage where it says never suffer a, and then it actually
Excuse me,
translates
I
to,
meant not a lexicon, I meant a concordance, a Bible concordance. But
yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead and
yeah,
go
yeah.
on.
I know. I did a whole study on that. I mean, it was a while ago, so it might be a good thing to get back into again if we do a witchcraft show or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's you know it's obviously witch is not a word that they would use. They did have ideas for like sorceress, female poison, but mostly it was poisoner. It seems to come up as a female poisoner. You know, was what witch was translated from. You know, which the original word. You know, I mean, it is what it is. You know,
I mean,
I
when you
don't
look at
think of
the
it right
English
now, but we
language,
can look it up. You know.
yeah, when you look at the English language, I guess that would make sense if you're gonna just, well, I guess that word fits like a puzzle. Let's just put it right there.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, let's get into the book of the law itself. So go to page 25. We're gonna go to chapter 1, and let's start with the first line, Had, the manifestation of Nuit. Now, what I thought was interesting about the first verse here is that in Crowley's commentary on this, he said he had mentioned that we're going to go into some gematria here, that Nu being 56 and Had 9, their conjunction is 65. Adonai, the holy guardian angel. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and then if you add 65 together, it's 11. Which that's you know his big thing is number 11 for that's the number of the great work. You know. So 11, it goes back. So yeah, he was really into gematria. These two things, I think we talked about. This first chapter is about Nuit, which is pretty much infinite possibility, infinite space. Anything could happen. And Had is our idea of taking all these possibilities and with our consciousness, making our reality. We make a decision and making our reality. You know. What was that with the balloons?
I know I saw some balloons going. Did you hit something on the screen?
No, I'm not.
I didn't. You know, I didn't hit nothing on the screen either. That was weird. I thought maybe you had some balloons.
I mean, it doesn't
like,
look
what are you
bad.
doing with all these balloons in your room, man?
It doesn't look bad. But I mean, are people like this isn't live where people could tune in and
it's not live. It's being recorded right now.
So yeah, that was funny though. I don't know. I'm not. I mean, I'm not touching the phone's right over there. I'm not touching anything.
And I'm not touching the screen either.
Yeah, that's funny.
I'm not really touching my computer right now.
Hey, maybe it's a sign that that the spirits, because this book will whip up spirits, man. I mean, it whips up spirits. All of Crowley's stuff, is really whips up a lot of spirits. Yeah.
That was interesting. Okay, so now let's go down to verse 3. And this is a very popular verse in this book. It says, every man and every woman is a star. Now, Crowley had said that concerning this verse, he says, each human being is an element of the cosmos, self-determined and supreme, co-equal with all other gods. And I think I agree with that. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. And I think what he's getting at too is every star, or even you could say planet or star, is on its own course. It's on its own course. And so we're stars because we're on our own course, and our course is the great work. Our course is getting in these incantations, learning about what we have to learn about, learning about limitations or grief or whatever, and going through. And that's like a star, just doing its orbit. So we're going through the orbit because we're in these bodies and we have to biologically do certain things, and then we also are trying to like understand what is this all about. What is this all about? It's we're on this orbit of life and death. We're on this orbit of the soul. I think he's coming from that perspective.
Yeah, we all have our own individual orbit and our own path. But yeah, let's go down to verse 4, and it says, every number is infinite. There is no difference. Now, what Crowley had said about this is a great and holy mystery. Although each star has its own number, each number is equal and supreme. Every man and every woman is not only a part of God, but the ultimate God, The center is everywhere and the circumference nowhere. The old definition of God takes new meaning for us. For each one of us is the one God. This can only be understood by the initiate. One must acquire certain high states of consciousness to appreciate it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you as you progress on your path and you find your true will, you do enter higher states of consciousness. Each one understood by the initiate. He also said that this removes the hierarchy. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think that's some notes I jotted down. It does remove the hierarchy because I heard someone say concerning this that a voice in your head or anyone else has no jurisdiction over you. Really? Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think he was trying to. I would even say more than the hierarchy. It is trying to dismantle the patriarchy. Because by the time Crowley, which was raised Christian, obviously, right, with the Plymouth Brethren and all that, he was raised as a strict Christian, Orthodox Christian. He was noticing how disrespectful and fearful the religion had become of women, and like the natural Trinity, and this is in his book. You can see like chapter 1 is about the goddess, a woman. Chapter 2 is more of a father or God, right? Father God, and chapter 3 is more of a child, and that makes more sense as the thing more than Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So like it's like you have two males. And then you could even argue that the third one's kind of has masculine because the Holy Spirit goes into men, right? So there's really not a lot of feminine stuff, and I think he's trying to reclaim that,
I mean, no doubt that Christianity is a ripoff of this, what we're talking about right now. Mm-hmm. And they definitely, the establishment definitely had tried to stamp out, any female aspect of God. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Just make it, pure male. So, yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think Crowley didn't like that. I mean, you could say what about his personal things or whatever, but I think he was like that. This is the true Christianity was like this in the beginning. So he's trying to basically move Christianity back to like it was a solar cult. It had an equal with men and women. It had like a family unit as the Trinity, right? Not like this confusing thing of Father, Son, which is it's almost like they created that just to confuse people because they didn't want people. At one point they didn't want people. Nobody knew how to. Even priests, a lot of priests didn't even know how to read and write. So they didn't want people to read the Bible. Until Martin Luther, and Protestantism came and said, no, everybody should read the Bible. Like if you were trying to read the Bible when, before Protestantism and even during Protestantism, it was considered a crime or whatever, they would say, no, you're not meant to read the Bible. You'll go crazy. You'll think you're the Pope. Who are you? The Pope is the only one who reads the Bible. The Pope tells the bishops, he tells the archbishops, the bishops, and by the time it gets down to you're like one priest, you just listen to what the priest says. Don't worry about reading the Bible. Come on,
That's hilarious, man. That's hilarious. Don't read the Bible. You'll think you're the Pope.
Yeah, or something like that. I mean, they didn't feel that it was like how modernly most even Catholicism, right? With Catholicism, they didn't feel that most people should read the Bible. It's like and most people couldn't even read. It was the Middle Ages, so even priests couldn't read mostly. That was the whole thing where Martin Luther started. He was a priest and he was illiterate, like all of them were, right? And one priest that was literate said, "Have you ever read the New Testament?" And I mean, he's a priest for 30 years already, right? Never read the New Testament. That's what you got to see. That's that. And when he said that and he read it, he's like, everybody needs to read this. And then of course they said, well, no, because if everybody reads it, then that weakens their authority, right? Because the only way to God, and this is part of the reason that England got a little witchy. We talked about that in the Enochian show and stuff. Is the only way to God for the Catholic Church, especially back in the old days, right? The Middle Ages and Elizabethan, all the way up to even pretty much modernly, right? Is the Pope is the only one who could really tell you what the Bible means and what this is all about. That's really the only authority you have all the way up to. So if you read the Bible, you come up with your own ideas. it's like, that's fine for you nowadays, but before they didn't even want you to come up with your own ideas, right? They're just like, the Pope says it, he gives it down.
Yeah.
By the time it comes down, somebody told your local priest what it is, and just listen to that priest. That's it. That's what they wanted, really, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, but
Protestantism is really what changed the whole thing. I mean, the Bible wasn't even in. Martin Luther was the first one to get it into German, and it wasn't even produced in the local languages. You know, it was in Latin only. You know, so and Latin was considered a magical language pretty much, and only priests
yeah,
knew it, and only certain priests knew it. You know. So,
right.
so modernly they all know it, but back in the day, they didn't all know it. You know.
Mm-hmm.
They just knew if you knew how to do math with the Latin and all that, but wasn't fluent in Latin and not enough to read Latin, like read the Latin the Vulgate is what they would call
Well,
it.
now Latin is considered something very, I guess you could say, special, because some people are, trying to learn it again, and it's starting to come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean. So
yeah, for sure.
Let's go to verse number 5, chapter 1, verse number 5. Help me, O warrior, Lord of Thebes, in my unveiling before the children of men. Now, Crowley says, here, Nuit appeals simply and directly, recognizing the separate function of each star of her body. Though all is one, each part of that one has its own special work, each star its particular orbit. And we had spoken about that earlier. But then he goes on to say, each soul is thus absolute, and good or evil, quote unquote, are merely terms descriptive of relations between destructible combinations. Let's see, good for a malarial patient, but evil for the germ of the disease. Heat is bad for ice cream and good for coffee. So it's kind of subjective on how you look at either side.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think that's an excellent point, and I think that's what all modern of these, like the church, if you want to look at Satanism or any kind of like Gnosticism, like I think they go in more that direction, where the other side, the right hand path would be more that no, there is absolute evil and absolute good, and you got to always be absolute good. But what you find yourself doing, because the world isn't going to change for everybody, is when you always go right, like for the right hand path, or always go good, what you think is good, you're really still going around in circles, because I mean, it's only one way, you can't really, and then going on the left hand path all the time. You always want to do things like on the darker side or the evil side or whatever you're going around, right? I think the idea is that that's why there's always trinities, right? Is the being in the middle, who is you, is trying to decide when to go left, when to go right, and what's appropriate for the thing. Like you don't want to be I mean, well, maybe some people want to be total pacifists, and I don't think that's a good way. What if they need to survive so they could write a great book or something, right? If somebody attacks them, they got to defend themselves. They're not going to be going right because, right is like, with Jesus, turn the other cheek, forgive, don't fight back. But if you have to fight back, if there's a war, if soldiers attack your house or something, you got to fight.
Yeah,
I mean,
you have
to survive. Maybe your true will is to move past, is to live past this war or live past this home invasion,
you can find your
or whatever attack,
Yeah, when you find your true will, it may go either way,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
But
So I think that's what he's getting at there is, you have to, and it
I would say,
Well,
I was going to say, I would say that the proper way would just be to find balance,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he goes on to say concerning this, Hippocrates or Hippocrates, the babe in the egg of blue, is not merely the god of silence in a conventional sense. He represents the higher self, the holy guardian angel. This is the task of the adept, to have the knowledge and conversation of his holy guardian angel, to become aware of his nature and his purpose, fulfilling them. And I think we had touched on that earlier.
Yeah. And the holy guardian angel is, I mean, I think modernly we would translate it as a higher self, something like that, You could say higher self, you could say, your own your own spirit, your own soul that you're trying to communicate with your mind or something like that. It's a separation of the human, definitely. That's how I would look at it.
Yeah, same. Now let's go down to verse 8. And this I thought this was very interesting. It says the cobs is in the coup, not the coup in the cobs. Crowley said concerning this, we are not to regard ourselves as base beings without whose sphere is light or God. Our minds and bodies are veils of the light within. The uninitiate is a dark star, and the great work for him is to make his veils transparent by purifying them. This purification is really simplification. It is not that the veil is dirty, but that the complexity of its fold makes it opaque. And sometimes it's good just to rely on simplicity. What do you think?
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
And I had brought this this saying up before in previous videos, and I think it's significant, is that the Japanese have a saying that goes, it is better to understand a little than to misunderstand a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that ties in with what Crowley was trying to say here.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Yeah. I mean, this is and you see his style. He's being very esoteric and very like this is like magical words. Like I had never heard these, and I don't think they're anywhere else. I'd never heard these words before reading this book. Had you heard of this before?
No, I haven't either.
No. Yeah.
No. But now Crowley goes on to commentate on this. He says not to fall in love with our magical image. He says to do this, we have all done it, is to forget our truth. If we adore form, it becomes opaque to being and may soon prove false to itself. The coup in each of us includes the cosmos as he knows it. To me, even another cobs is only part of my coup. Our own cobs is our one soul truth. And kind of what I got out of that is do not worship our magical image. Our magic and selves are to constantly evolve. Do you agree with that tying in?
Yeah, I mean, as far as magic, I mean, I think that there is a separation, and I'm sure Crowley with his students, and this is with my experience with the Thelemic teachers, is like there is two kinds of magic. There's high magic and low magic. And this is all high magic is where he's getting from, right? Is the point of high magic is to ascend into something different than a human or into a god or whatever you want your image is. But it's to understand your life and ascend into something higher or something that, if you want to, don't even look at it higher or lower, something else, because you've mastered the human experience, right? that's kind of like the idea of a high magic, right? Where low magic is more like sorcery, I'm going to do this and try to get some money. I'm going to do a little spell to get money. I'm doing a love spell to try to attract people that I like in my life for that. I'm doing a revenge spell because this guy messed me up and I'm going to just curse him, right? All that's low magic, they call it, right? But that has its place too. I mean, we do shows on that all the time, and that has its place too. But this is high magic. That's why I think, but I guess I would agree with you that it's not good to worship either one of those techniques too much, because with anything, it should be with moderation, and understanding.
I think what it comes down to is need. There's times when you can do a high magic ritual, and then low magic, it has its necessity.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to verse 37 in the book of the law. And it says, also the mantras and spells, the obeah and the wanga, the work of the wand and the work of the sword, these he shall learn and teach. Now concerning this, on the commentary, Crowley said, magic is the art of causing change in existing phenomena. This definition includes raising the dead, bewitching cattle, making rain, acquiring goods, fascinating judges, and all the rest of the program. Good, but it also includes every act of. So, it is not possible to utter word or do deed without producing the exact effect proper and necessary thereto. Thus, magic is the art of life itself. Magic is the management of all we say and do, so that the effect is to change that part of our environment which dissatisfies us. Until it does so no longer, we remold it nearer to the heart's desire. Now, I had did a video recently with Taylor Elwood, and one thing we talked about is, he pressed the significance of changing yourself so that in turn changes the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Becoming magic itself and working on yourself. Sometimes instead of doing magic on different circumstances and people, change yourself first. You know what I mean? It kind of makes it easier to fall into place. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think that's a big problem with modern society is they kind of expect, and I'm not putting any particular group or anything, but a lot of younger generation people, for whatever reason, believe that the world has to change for them, and we, like, for example, like I was a punk rocker and a goth, back in the 80s, and that made me a target. I didn't expect the world to change. I didn't expect to say, oh, everybody's just so, I mean, we just expected to get because that's what we were signing up for. Where
Right.
kids these days, it seems like, which, I'm all for it. Now it's more socially acceptable. It's not acceptable for people to be throwing things at you when you're dressed like a goth or whatever, and people jumping out of the car wanting to fight you or whatever, and calling you, derogatory names or whatever. It's not socially acceptable to do that, and we're making progress to it. But people can't expect that there's never going to be somebody that's gonna do, try to attack you or try to say you're a bad person for doing this, or you're this or you're that. So the world's not going to change for you. The only thing you can do is change for yourself. And I think Taylor's totally right on that. I read a lot of his stuff. As a matter of fact, just a little plug on myself, as the official Dark Sorcery talent scout, I think I set up the interview.
Right.
So, because I was really impressed. I mean, he comes in, he's got a lot of good writing.
Yeah, you
He's written on
introduced
chaos
us.
magic, on pop magic a lot, and been a big inspiration for me. So I completely agree with that, and that's how I interpret it. Is don't expect the world to change. If you want to change yourself and then see how the world changes, then. But I mean, myself, I know I'm always going to be strange. I'm not going to probably get along with what we call normals or straights or whatever, mundanes, because they just, even if I'm not wearing makeup or something, or I'm not wearing a costume, the way I look at my energy, my presence is going to put people a little bit like, whoa, this guy's kind of like witchy or wizardry or whatever,
Well, I mean, not only that, I mean, once you change yourself and you become magic, and you don't just do magic, it's just what you become. I think that that rubs off on your aura. People pick up on that.
For sure. Yeah, and I think it is true. Like that's why we can meditate more on what we do say or what we do move, like yoga, like how we move, right? Because everything we say is an incantation, and it brings some result. Maybe it doesn't bring it as much the right result we want, or maybe it doesn't bring as strong a result as we want. But everything we say and do is is an incantation and a ritual. So it's like, it is, no matter what, you're you are
think
magic.
about it.
You just gotta take that on as your awareness of that,
That's very true that you say that, because I mean, look at the average person's daily routine. I mean, they have a job, they go to work. It's almost like they go in circles every day, kind of like you're going in circles around the altar. You wake up, you go to your job, you run your errands for the day, you come back home, you do it again the next day, and and the whole time while you're doing that, you're saying things. Whether you're putting yourself down or building yourself up with words, or putting other people down with words or building them up with words. You're saying incantations during, all day long, while you're running your errands, while you're going to work, while you're doing this daily ritual.
Yeah.
So really, it is true, to become magic, and your life is the ritual, basically.
Yeah. And I think this circles back to the Book of the Law, and that this, this kind of breaks routines a little bit. And I think this book, I mean, if anything, this book really can really just open up a whole new worldview, and have more spirits, because it is so witchy and so so esoteric, and the way that he did it, I mean, I think there is something to the way he did it, where with having his wife, incantated, and he writes it down and all this. And I mean, there is something to this, and it does read, you can see a lot of the inspiration, and he even has direct quotes, little mini quotes from them, is like revelation in the Bible, right? In
Yeah.
the actual Bible, revelation. You can tell this is based on revelation. A lot of this, he has some actual quotes. I can't think of them off the hand, but they're actually from there. Like he was clean is clean. He was filthy will stay filthy. Those kind of things. Like
Well, there's also people that say that during the time of him writing this book, that Crowley was heavily influenced by Buddhism, and it shows in some of the writing. Would you agree with that?
For sure, for sure. I mean, he mentions mantras like that. Like, I mean, and that's what I think. That's one thing I was thinking about the other day, because it's saying mantras and Buddhism. Like, one of the best chants I use is Buddhist. And I think everybody should learn to do a chant. And I mean, the easiest one obviously is something like Om, like Om Om.
Right.
That's just the one thing. But the one in Buddhist is Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and you can say it in different enunciations, and that just clears your mind. That's all it's really doing, is clearing your mind. It's occupying. You're basically kind of hypnotizing yourself, and so you're clearing your mind, and you're not letting just your mind like be like the Flying Dutchman, like it's flying around. Oh, I'm thinking about this thing I did last Tuesday. I'm thinking about, what does this person think of me? Oh, what about my job? What about, your mind is not all over the place. That's what meditation and mantras and all that is about. And that's what I get from this book a lot too. Is after you read this book, what it really is asking you to, what it's challenging you to do, I believe, and it's teaching you magic in a real esoteric way, and things you can figure out with numerology, and you can get obsessed with this book, and I have before, right, for years, and I'm still, I've read it like 20 years ago, and I'm still not fully understanding it, and every time I read it I get a new thing.
Well, part of the beauty of the book is that it's very elaborate. Not only the book itself, but Crowley's commentary on the book. I mean, you can look at it so many different ways. It's just endless, and I think that's why the Lima, is becoming very popular, and I think that's why this book is becoming very popular as time goes on. It's just it's like a giant puzzle that can never completely be solved, but it's fun trying to solve it.
Yeah. And I think part of it is that and I don't know if even Crowley did this intentionally, or if he's trying to say it's coming straight from his subconscious, or him and his wife's subconscious, or something like that. It's part of it is, I think they want you to constantly be making, solving a puzzle, because that's kind of like the mantra. That's organizing your mind in a different way, and you're thinking of this puzzle instead of thinking of mundane thoughts, and that's your magic, becoming magic. You know what I mean?
Right on. So now, Crowley had some further commentary that I want to touch on this. He says, remember also that unless you know what your true will is, you may be devoting the most laudable energies destroying yourself. Remember that every word and deed is a witness to thought, and therefore your mind must be perfectly organized. Its sole duty to interpret circumstances in terms of the will, so that speech and action may be rightly directed to express the will appropriately to the occasion. Remember that every word and every deed which is not a definite expression of your will counts against it. Indifference worse than hostility. Your enemy is at least interested in you. You may make him your friend, as you never can do with a neutral. Remember that magic is the art of life, therefore of causing change in accordance with will. Therefore, its law is love under will, and its every movement is an act of love. But yeah, until you find your true will, you could be destroying yourself. I mean, that's easily. I mean, because someone could have a bad habits. Let's say someone is an alcoholic. They don't try, and instead of finding their true will, they try to drink their problems away, Well, then in a sense, that's kind of destroying yourself. And then when you find your true will, it changes you because it challenges you. This challenges you to have self-discipline and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And as you progress with your magical life this way, you begin to change yourself. So that other stuff just kind of doesn't matter as much. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely think that, I mean, whenever anybody ever gets in like kind of an addiction situation,
Yeah.
is they've kind of given up on everything else, and I think that even goes for the so-called personality disorders. I think they've become addicted to like a technique, like the narcissist technique of always putting yourself first, or playing these games, or the borderline technique, where you're always like you're always wanting to fight with people, so that they're interested in you. And then when they try to leave, because they're like, no, I don't want you to leave though, but I do. But you did ruin everything for me, right? They want to blame that person. They want to have somebody to blame. They want to have somebody to get what they call supply, right? Which narcissists and borderline, they have to have supply. They have to have the person reacting in a certain passionate way, right? And if they're not acting in a passionate way, then they'll start trouble, start an argument. And that's why you see so many couples that love each other fight, because they're worried that indifference is coming on, right? Because you were mentioning the thing before, indifference. That's the actual opposite of love, love and arguing and strife and all that. That is like the other side of love, love and hate, you could even say, are two sides of the same coin, but indifference, just not caring about anything, then that's the opposite of love, because you're like, you don't even, and if you're indifferent to a person, you have no input at all. That's why when I go online, and I was arguing this the other day, or not arguing, but I was making this point in this other video I was doing about online trolling and Discordianism and stuff, is even if somebody puts in, hey, stupid post, man, I hate this, right? And that's still putting energy into it. Or like somebody will I'll put a selfie, and somebody will put, nobody cares, It's like, if you didn't care, you wouldn't be actually commenting anything, right? You're trying to comment an insult. That's still putting energy into it,
It
I would
is
say
when you focus on it. Sometimes it's best just to not even acknowledge it.
One of the techniques I use, and they were asking me about this, and this kind of goes for Crowley too. It's kind of almost an occultic technique he uses, because obviously this stuff is not in good grammar and stuff, the way he's writing this. I mean, it's been taken from what he's scribbled down, right? But it's following like not all the rules or whatever, right? So one of the things I do is I actually do intentionally misspell words, or put bad grammar, or put things that are a little confusing and things, right? So then people will notice that, and they'll be like, oh, look at, what an idiot, what horrible grammar, What, oh, you misspelled this, right? I mean, that's one of the funniest things I see is, I don't know if they have intentionally meant to do it, and I picked up this technique, is they had a Facebook group, and it was called The Real Aleister Crowley, right? And it was going to be like, this is really, but they spelled Aleister wrong, right?
That's funny.
So I've done that a few times. I'd be like, I have in-depth knowledge about Aleister Crowley and his written works, right? It's spelled Aleister wrong. And then you get all these people, and then they don't realize they're putting it. They might have not have commented before. They might have just given it a thing, a like, right? But now you got a like, or a laughing or whatever. You got a reaction, and you got a comment, even if it's a negative comment saying, "Hey, idiot, you spelled Aleister wrong," right? But you're still putting some input into it. You're still casting your own spell at me, which I could actually convert with chaos magic, or with Kalima, or any magic.
I was just going to bring up chaos magic. Yeah, that's clever.
Yeah. So you can convert any energy coming to you, positive or negative. It's all love. That's why they use agape. So when they say 93, it means it actually 93 corresponds to agape, love. And it's a special kind of love, because there's different kinds of love in Greek. Agape is actually the love of God, and so it's kind of more, like, because there's also like eros, which is sexual love. There's a storky, which is like love between like friends and family kind of, and there's philo, which is like brotherly and sisterly love, right? So there's all these different loves and different words for them, and they're whole different concepts. The agape was just came up with for the New Testament, and it meant like the love of God. We all have the love of God in us, So when you say 93, or you say agape, or you say love, love is the law, love under will, his idea was, it's kind of like a Western version of the namaste, you know? How namaste is, you know, the God in me sees the God of you, or I'm an avatar, you're now, you know, I have understanding of you. We all both have higher selves, and like namaste, right? He's saying agape, we both have the love of God. Like, so you have the love of God, I have the love of God. I say 93 to you. I say love is the law, love under will, because that means I acknowledge that. It's kind of a way of saying namaste, you know, that's and that goes into what he's, you know, where he's coming from too with the Buddhism, and well, that's Hinduism in particular, right? But Buddhism has their own, they all do like the bows and stuff like that too, right? Which all
Yeah.
of that corresponds back to whatever you're going to say. If you know, a word usually
Kind
in
of a
Eastern,
universal thing, because
yeah,
everybody, I mean, everybody has their own version of how they say the love of God all over
yeah,
the world.
uh-huh.
Same gestures. I mean, lots of cultures do that. You know.
Yeah. Or like in Islam, they say shalom, like peace. But you know, or you know, like Ashasamalanka. You know, they have these different ways of saying we understand, and they're even more like we understand we understand that we have the same God. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to verse 49.
All right.
And on verse 49, it says, abrogate are all rituals, all ordeals, all words and signs. Ra Horquit had taken his seat in the east at the equinox of the gods, and let Asar be with Isa, who also are one, but they are not of me. Let Asar be the adorant, Isa the sufferer, for in his secret name and splendor is the Lord initiating. Now, Crowley had to say about this. This verse declares that the old formula of magic, the Osiris, Adonis, Jesus, Dionysus, etc., formula of the dying god is no longer efficacious. It rested on the ignorant belief that the sun died every day and every year, and that its resurrection was a miracle. The formula of the new eon recognizes Horus, the child crowned and conquering, as God. We are all members of the body of God, the sun, and about our system in the ocean of space. This formula is then to be based upon these facts: are evil, error, darkness, illusion, whatever one chooses to call it, is simply a phenomenon of accidental and temporary separateness. If you are walking in darkness, do not try to make the sun rise by self-sacrifice, but wait in confidence for the dawn and enjoy the pleasures of the night meanwhile. So just make the best of a bad situation and just be patient, basically. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think that is the best way to get through life. You know, definitely is to try to you know make the best of any situation. Is to you know is because I mean you know, and this goes back to the Buddhism too. You know, and I think Crowley had an idea of this of samsara. You know, is people come back and come into these, you know, infinite lives in even infinite timelines. I would say modernly we could understand it like with quantum mechanics and stuff. Is so when we die here, we could go back to being a child and try to do this whole life again with all these different changes. Hopefully, we have some kind of like soul memory and we do it again. You know, and then when
Yeah.
we finally master this life, then we'll go into another life. And people need to be born in all different ways. You know, like people need to be born where they can't move. You know, where their you know their limbs don't, some of their limbs don't work, or all of their limbs don't work. And it's interesting to see in that time, would somebody survive like that? That talks about, that's really a statement of humanity. You know, like in some there was times, you know, like caveman times or whatever, where baby was born severely deformed or something, they just didn't have nothing to do. You know, they probably just let the baby die. You know, they didn't have the love, they didn't have the will, they didn't have the power, they didn't have the technology to do it. You know,
Yeah.
so I think we come back as these things to test humanity just as much as we are testing our own souls. You know, and the whole human experience. And you know, and that's just how I look at it. You know, but that's the whole. That's why I could definitely feel the Hinduism and the Buddhism in here, even though he does put it down later. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
He does put it down in the book later. I don't know if we'll go over that part this time, but you know.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about it in a future video.
Yeah.
But now let's go over to chapter 2, and this is going to be verse 22. So let me go over to chapter 2. Hold on.
Let me see here.
All right, so let me know when you're there.
Let's see. Is it?
All right, so verse 22.
See, it's I am the snake. Is that?
Yeah, I am the snake.
Yeah, okay.
So it says, I am the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory, and stir the hearts of men with drunkenness. To worship me, take wine and strange drugs whereof I will tell my prophet and be drunk thereof. They shall not harm ye at all. It is a lie. It is folly against self. The exposure of innocence is a lie. Be strong, O man. Lust, enjoy all things of sense and rapture. Fear not that any God shall deny thee for this. Now, what Crowley has to say about this verse is, wine and strange drugs do not harm people who are doing their will. They only poison people who are cancerous with original sin. In Latin countries, where sin is not taken seriously, and sex expression is simple, wholesome, and free, drunkenness is a rare accident. It is only in Puritan, and against where we're talking about the times back then. It's different now, but it is only in Puritan countries where self-analysis under the whip of a coarse bully like Billy Sunday 12 brings the hearer to conviction of sin, that he hits first the trail and then the booze. Can you imagine an evangelist in Taormina? It is to laugh. That is why missionaries in all these centuries have produced no conversions whatsoever. The craving for these things is caused by the internal misery which their use reveals to the slave souls. If you are really free, you can take cocaine as simply as salt water taffy. There's no better rough test of a soul than its attitude to drugs. If a man is simple, fearless, eager, he is all right. He will not become a slave. If he is afraid, if he is already a slave, let the whole world take opium, hashish, and the rest. Those who are liable to abuse them were better dead. And then he goes down to say, if he is afraid, he is already a slave. So basically, I mean, if you want to experiment with drugs, go ahead. Just make sure it's done for a purpose.
Yeah.
So you can learn something out of it. Now, I will say that, hard drugs do lower your vibration. But depending on your individual point of view, make sure it's done for a purpose. If you try to learn something out of it, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's actually kind of like trying to invoke the idea of shamanism. Like doing these things for a vision, or doing these things to help you with your rituals and your high magic, or any kind of magic, I guess. You know, I think that there's definitely, when you do, like the hard drugs and all that. I mean, people should show discernment. I guess what he's saying is, if you're mentally sound, which, I mean, people would say this before, like if you have like a bunch of, you're depressed or you got some mental issues already, it's not a good idea to probably take like a LSD, or any psychedelic like that, and
Right.
then I would say it's not a good idea to take any of them, because if you're depressed and you get a drug that makes you feel not depressed, then you're going to be dependent on that drug. That's where addiction sets in and stuff,
Yeah,
and there's always a process to that. There's always a presence and a process to a potential for drugs to mess up somebody's life, or for them to give up everything except this one drug because it artificially changes them, and they've lost faith in like another human being, like in a relationship or a religion or anything else making them feel that way. They've pretty much given up on, and the only thing they want to do is use this kind of like this cheat code, which is the drug.
Yeah, that's cool. I've never heard anyone refer to drugs as cheat codes.
Yeah.
That's
I think it's a good
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, I think it's a good analogy. I mean,
but then again, I want to notate that, it's kind of like, you mentioned cheat code. If you want to use a video game as an analogy, it's kind of like you can use cheat codes in a game, but then that defeats the whole purpose of the game, is to experience it. You know what I mean? So yeah, you can use cheat codes, but it can kind of take away your purpose. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and you could even lump in there maybe like psych meds, because that's not really recreational drugs, but that is, like Prozac and all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, the thing is things we do, right? Like whether it's a process, like gambling or having sex or being in a relationship or falling in love, those things like they produce neurotransmitters, like serotonin,
Yeah,
dopamine, method, the melatonin. I mean, these are like neurotransmitters that gets done. But when people like gamble or when they just go and read a book or that makes them feel good, And after a while, these drugs are cheat codes because you just take the drug, it just makes you feel. You don't really have to do anything other than take the drug. But the drug alone becomes a ritual, right? Because you
yeah,
ever see people that do drugs? I mean, and not even hard drugs, right? Like say weed. People like to have like a rolling table. They like to do the rolling or they like to have like paraphernalia around and make it a whole ritual. And then heroin, of course, if you see that, they got the spoon, they got the lighter, they got the
yeah.
whole little rig. That's a whole ritual, So they turn it
It
into a
is
ritual to also, and they get a high. I mean, addicts, because I'm a drug counselor, so I worked with addicts a lot. Addicts start getting the high when they just get their equipment out, their paraphernalia out. That is just as powerful as the drug. I mean, and then it helps,
because it's
when the
the
drug comes.
anticipation.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah, because they know
anticipation.
that they're going to get that. So they're already those neurotransmitters are already starting to be, like that. Whether it's them getting their spoon and all that stuff, or somebody even just like making lines with cocaine, that gets them a high when they're making the lines, because
Yeah.
they know they're going to use those lines soon, and the stuff's already coming through. So
Mhm.
it's
Well,
we turn that into a ritual. When he's talking about drugs, you know, uh, we could do like a whole thing on drugs and the occult or drugs and magic and everything.
yeah, that could be
Yeah,
a video in itself. But
it was
a lot
actually
of
very very forward. I mean, I don't think anybody had done that before because I think at his time, the in 1904 when he was writing this stuff or the early 1900s. I mean, I think the idea of drugs, even shamanism, right, was that that's not what people do in the West. That's an uncivilized thing, Like so, you go find like an Amazon tribe and they do this weird mushroom and they're a bunch of savages and you're just getting messed up on this and acting crazy, right? I mean, even like people go to Africa, they'd have certain drugs they'd take and they'd be like, oh yeah, that's part of being a savage, because Crowley was from the time where it was like kind of like the civilized, colonizer kind of like like with the safari hat and all that, he's going around. Oh, it's almost like when you would go to these less civilized people. uh it was kind of almost like you're exploring, and it was almost kind of like observing. Wow, imagine that's what humans were like 1,000 years ago, and I'm glad I'm not like that. Look at how much we progressed into these like the English gentlemen or whatever,
mm,
and and America had its own kind of version, the pioneer and the Wild West and all that. So
well,
they have
you
their own
you had
version of
mentioned
splitting it up,
you had mentioned about that being a ritual in itself, the preparation, and it is. But
Mhm.
also, keep in mind the fact that sometimes when people do drugs, they get epiphanies. Things
Mhm.
are just brought from their subconscious mind. They go, aha, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that like uh cannabis is not a dangerous drug, necessarily.
No,
I think it's a and like the edibles and stuff like that. I think that definitely is a like a trip that would helps me come up with a lot of ideas. I'm for that, and it's legal in my state. I don't know if it
right.
is in yours, but not yet.
Yeah,
But
it's a different story.
hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, I think in closing, let's go ahead and talk a bit about the famous saying, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Universe aligns with those who do their true will. It
Mhm.
does.
Yeah.
These are just kind of some notes that I put together on this. So the universe aligns with those who do their true will. The cards know what you're going to ask before you do. The zodiac knows what you're going to do before you do it. If you are doing your true will, things will flow like a river. They will.
Mhm.
Um, Things kind of just fall into place as far as your direction. Um, What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, and I think that's the whole idea. I mean, if we want to do it like summary, I think it's
Yeah.
important to what that there's 3 chapters in the Book of the Law, and each one are about a particular being. And you could break it down to like a goddess, god, son, or son of the goddess and gods kind of thing, or sibling or child at the end, right? Really, he actually calls it child, right?
Yeah.
So uh, the idea is that the first chapter is about Nuit. Nuit is this goddess here, and this is the stele of revealing. It's really important to have to look this up online or have this. This is covers like what Crowley said he saw in the museum in Cairo that him and his wife like based this whole book on. Him and Rose Kelly, his wife at the time, and you can see Nuit is this female that's bending over. She's actually represents like infinite space, And Nuit means night in French, and he changed it from because usually this Egyptian goddess was called Nut, but it's really hard to say, and it was spelled N-U-T, so everybody would say, "Oh, a nut," right? They say nut, and that doesn't really come off good as it got. Doesn't really. So he would change it to Nuit, so it's like the night, right? So
Right.
this is the night. This thing here, this is Hadith, this circle with the wings, And
These are what the different. These are what the different chapters of the book
yeah.
are
It's
separated
like he set
at.
his own Trinity
Those
up,
who are
his own
watching.
little Trinity up. Like in Christianity, they have Trinity. They have a Hinduism. They have the Trinity too, right? They have a Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. The creator, the preserver, the destroyer, that kind of thing. And it's the same kind of idea here. I mean, the creator obviously is this mother figure. This is. You can also look at this as creator too. It's like the infinite. This is infinite space, and you create your own reality by having your awareness as being this dot, this hadith,
Yeah.
and that's the hadith. And then the other part is these characters here. That's Rahor Queet, and that's the scribe Ankan. I can't remember. We were talking about him earlier. Ankanasu, something like that. So
Right.
this is basically selling. This is like the god doing his magic, and this is like the world being created, and this is the world, and you are the magician, the god that's creating the world. But you're using you're looking at it, the infinite possibilities of Nuit, and you're using your consciousness and taking one of those possibilities and creating the reality. It's almost like the last video we did. There's a superposition, all these different
You
things, and
know,
then you create the timeline by pulling,
it's
by making that decision, by noticing the particles, instead of like looking away.
it's kind of like if someone goes to get a reading done on them,
Mm-hmm.
and the person doing the reading says, "Well, this is going to happen." Now the ball's in their court, the person who's getting the reading done on them. I mean, if that's not in their will, if that's not really what they want to do, then chances are they can take a different route. But if it is, if that person doing the reading had never mentioned it to them, well, then they could just chances are they wouldn't even notice anything. They wouldn't pay any attention to it, and then that would manifest in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. For sure, yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like, I mean, it's not all predestined. You could
like,
go
they can
and
turn that
somebody could tell
down
you,
if
prophesy to
they
you.
focus on it. Yeah.
They could prophesy that they think something, this is going to happen wrong, that or whatever their questions are. Oh yeah, that's going to go bad. It's your choice whether to act on that or not, and it's not always our choice,
Right.
really, because some of these things are beyond our control. Like when people have emotions, they could tell, right? I mean, and you don't even have to be a psychic or anything, right? We've all had friends that it's like that's the wrong person for them, right? You're going down the wrong
Right.
road. It's not going to end well, right? And everybody sees that. Maybe they don't tell it to their face so much because they'll argue or they'll get hurt or whatever. But you see that, you can tell the person, but they don't have any control. They're still going to go. I mean, I know I've been there. Like I've been there, like with the last woman that I had children with was totally the worst thing ever, and
Mhm.
not something I should have had in my life at all. But it happened, and and then once children were involved, I kind of was connected to that person until the kids were older, or until I raised them on my own, whatever. So I
Yeah.
had to, deal with that, even if I didn't want to. But then eventually, people got through to me where I could, I could deal as civil as I can to that person. And when they did get too out of control, where something like where they're going to cause a scene and the police are going to come, I mean, I just cut it out totally. Even if it hurt my feelings or whatever, I learned to control my emotions enough to like cut this person out totally, but it takes a lot of time.
I think
And
that's the whole point of going through the struggle that you and so many people can relate, is that you have to learn self-control. You have to learn to be balanced and get through it. Then you move on to the next step. Until then, you're just going to keep going through that again and again until you get it right.
Yeah, and there's lots of things. I mean, one of the when I had a mentor once, and he taught me, and I think this has to do with this, and it has to do with magic, is he said, the biggest thing a lot of people don't get is, like, if somebody else is reacting a certain way, like say they're getting their energy up and they're yelling at you and they're doing all this stuff, right? You don't have to react the same way. As a matter of fact, it's probably best for you not to bring your vibration and bring your energy and bring your temperature up to them, because then you're just barking back and forth insults or something, right? And that's not really, getting anything accomplished, right? So if you just sit back and just, consider, and you don't even have to make a comment, because that'll just get them more mad. You could just say, okay, this person's losing control. I'm not going to lose control. I'm just observing what they're doing. You don't even want to go to protect yourself if the person's going to actually hit you if they're in person. But I mean, a lot of this stuff online. All this stuff online. It's like the people just say these things because they just can. And I mean, and this is magic. This is modern day magic. If somebody says something on Facebook and you read it and it affects you anyway, maybe it bums you out for the day, right? Or you think about it and say, maybe I am like that. That's a spell that they've cast on you, That's a spell. And a lot of these people, if you don't know them personally, like, why would you even care? I mean, they're trying to entrap you. They're trying to ensnarl you with spells by trolling you,
Yeah, people are throwing around spells, they don't even know it. But
Yeah,
man, it's been a good conversation. If those of you who haven't, many of you have who are watching this, but the Book of the Law, it's worth diving into and studying.
Yeah.
And there's so much elaborate stuff in there that's interesting and to ponder and just to dwell on. So,
And
but yeah,
just reading passages out loud. I mean, and people would argue that if you're a Christian, that people do this with the Bible. Just reading things, reading passages of this is powerful. Even if you don't understand it. I mean, I think just like Christians do with their verses. I think some Thelemites do that too. They go through and they'll do some bibliomancy, right? They'll just turn to this certain page. Oh, what does this say? The end of the hiding of Hadith and blessing of the worship prophet of the loving star. What does that mean for you right now with your situation? You ask a question, you get this little snippet of text. Maybe it's inspirational, maybe it's not. So that it's a really good book for that. You got to look at it in that context. And it does teach a lot of magic, and it teaches a lot of things, and a lot of it's meant to be to like shake up your subconscious.
it is.
Yeah.
It is. That's a good way of putting it, shaking up your subconscious. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, everyone who's watching, check out Guion's links, all the social media links, Guillotine Productions. All those links are below in the video description. And check us out, Dark Sorcery. Check us on X at Dark Sorcery 84, and all our social media platforms will be below in the video description. Guion, thanks once again for coming on. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. See you next
And everyone
time.
who's watching, like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery.